Well, the 2020s have been a weird decade, and we're only halfway through at this point. Depending on who you ask, it either feels like they just started 5 minutes ago or that we have lived several lives since the beginning of them. In just a handful of years, we've survived Ticketmaster wars, Barbenheimer, a TikTok ban, and perhaps most notably, a global pandemic. The way we consume media, discover trends, form opinions, and even interact with each other has changed so drastically since January 1st, 2020, that some of the ways we used to communicate or create or talk to each other are honestly obsolete at this point, which sounds insane to say. And in many ways, pop culture has truly been at the center of it all. In today's world, our feeds and our life experiences can be very tailored to us as individuals, but we still end up having these massive collective moments together because that's what brings us together as people. Today, I want to look at the defining pop culture moments of the 2020s so far, from COVID era dance trends to the death of cable, the nostalgia boom, and also ask a big question, which is really what role does pop culture play in our lives as a whole? Before we discuss all that, let's first do a little create and consume. If you're a newer listener, we do this segment at the top of every episode where I share what I've been creating and consuming this week, and you can let me know what you've been creating and consuming as well. All the ways to get in touch are always in the show notes, so if you've read a great book lately, or you watched a great movie, or you made a YouTube video that you're really proud of, that is what I'm talking about when I say create and consume. So let me know what you've been working on and watching. For me this week, I just posted a YouTube vlog to my channel on my Austen Tosone channel, if you're watching this episode on the podcast account, where I did my mid-year reset. And this is a video that I do pretty much every year where I take some time to review the goals that I set at the beginning of the year, ask myself how the year is going overall, and make a plan for the last 6 months of the year. You know, sometimes we start out in January with all of these grand plans, but life happens and our priorities shift and change. So I always find it helpful to do a realistic check-in midway through the year. I also do a physical reset, so I clean up the apartment. I do a digital declutter where I get rid of more than 20 apps that I haven't been using and clear out a ton of stuff from my camera roll. So if you're looking for a little guidance on how to do your own mid-year reset, you can follow along with me in that vlog. I will link it in the show notes if you'd like to check it out. And for what I'm consuming this week, I am swept up in the World Cup, as I have been for the last couple of weeks, and it's crazy to think that this will be coming to an end this weekend if you're listening to this episode when it comes out. So I don't know what the final match will entail. I don't know who's going to win, but I do know that I've actually enjoyed watching over the last few weeks. It's been really fun to tune into the different matches, see some amazing playing, especially from the goalkeepers. If you don't know, I was a high school goalie, so obviously not anywhere on the same level as these people, but I do enjoy watching and seeing how different players are able to defend and react and do all the things. I'm really excited for some of the smaller countries that have been spotlighted in this run, like Cape Verde, and at the time I'm recording, Norway has made it further than they've ever made it before. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all shakes out. And I've also been enjoying content of all of the tourists who are in the US for the World Cup, seeing them experience America and what they think about our food, about our stores, about basically everything here. And it's been really heartwarming for the most part. So I've really enjoyed seeing people share their experiences coming to visit the States, many of which for the first time. It really does spark joy, and I feel like that camaraderie is something worth celebrating. And that actually is the perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today, because the collective moments that we all kind of experience together as a unit, as a group of people, as humans, is something that I have just been thinking about a lot lately. And I feel like we typically get content like this kind of list of the biggest moments of the year, typically in December at the end of the year. But I feel like we're in a very unique position right now to be in the middle of one of the craziest decades that humanity has probably ever seen. What's that Lenin quote? It's like there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. Well, I feel like a lot of the weeks from 2020 to 2025 can be classified as that. So let's go through and talk about some of these defining pop culture moments from this decade so far. And I've basically scripted this episode to encompass 2020 through 2025. So if you haven't heard me mention anything that has happened so far in 2026, that's why. And I tried to do this as much in chronological order as I could. And I'm really excited to get into this. I feel like I typically don't take a moment to reflect on things like this unless it's the end of the year and that creator pops up on TikTok who always has the songs about the stuff that's happened so far in the year or the biggest moments. And I feel like having sit down to really think about, like, okay, what are the key things that like the 2020s will be remembered for? This is kind of the list that I've come up with. Okay, unfortunately, we do need to talk about the pandemic. That is the number one thing. And it's also the first thing chronologically because the pandemic really came to fruition right in the beginning of 2020. I believe the earliest cases in Wuhan, China, and then in Italy were reported in February, and it had reached the United States by March. This has to be the opening chapter because it influences basically everything that follows it. So the US entered lockdown in mid-March. There were travel bans issued, there were stay-at-home orders, social distancing, and if I never in my life ever hear the phrase the novel coronavirus ever again, I will be a happy person. So hopefully that was the last time that I just heard it and you all just heard it too. I mean, that was just a horrible time. Now, my personal COVID lockdown experience was pretty harrowing and scary. We almost lost my dad to COVID. We very thankfully did not, but it was really not a fun time. And even in the days where there was a little bit of levity, it was still just such a really scary time. And I think that for me and also a lot of people I know, it was an experience that was unlike anything we had ever gone through before. And in many ways, that led us to reevaluate kind of everything. I mean, even just looking at what stay at home orders did to businesses, for example, like businesses had to learn how to pivot. I remember fashion brands like Christian Siriano basically stopped all of their production and just started making fabric masks to supply New York City residents and hospitals with. You know, at-home subscription services like Peloton really thrived during that time. I think even like SoulCycle was offering to rent their bikes to people for like an unknown amount of time, month to month. So you could go pick up a bike from a physical SoulCycle location and bring it to your apartment because you couldn't go to a SoulCycle class. I love that there were a lot of businesses, like I remember Dan and John's, you could order wings to send to hospital workers. And I feel like people really did show up for each other in that time. And as much as there was sadness and just like disbelief that we even ended up in a predicament like this in the first place, I do feel like people really came through for each other. And I feel like in addition to the comfort that we were able to provide from each other for a distance, there was a lot that kind of thrived and changed, especially with what we typically were doing when we were stuck at home, which was a lot of staring at our screens, a lot of consuming content, and a lot of consuming media. I mean, Tiger King became a cultural phenomenon. Like, there's no way in hell that I would have watched that show if there was like anything else on during that time. I also remember getting sucked into Bachelor Listen to Your Heart and like my mom and Andrew watching with me because there was literally nothing else to do. Zoom culture exploded. So the startup that I was working for at the time, we basically, you know, got out of our office as soon as we could and we became fully remote. And then the company actually became permanently remote after that. Like there was no point in even going back to an office at that point because we could all work remotely. And Zoom culture was a crazy time. Like the number of subscriptions and the money that Zoom probably made during that season is insane. I remember I did an interview with Bustle about like Zoom makeup tips. If I can find a link to that. I don't know if they've like cleared out all of their COVID content or not, but if I can find a link to that, I will put it in the show notes. And there was just a real shift generally in flexibility and work from home, especially from companies that had never before like allowed their employees to work from home, where they had to find new systems and security measures to set up to make sure everything was safe and functional and flowing. And it really did just change everything. And I just want to say a very quick thank you to all of the essential workers who really like stepped up and kept things running during that time and who kept as many people alive as they could. Like every single doctor and nurse and everybody who, you know, helped get my dad back and who was able to somehow put on a brave face and go to work every day during that time. I have absolutely no idea how you did it. I really admire you. And if you work in any kind of essential worker job like that and you haven't felt much gratitude lately, I really just want to say like a heartfelt thank you because we need you. We needed you then, we need you now, and I'm just so appreciative. And that brings me to the explosion of a little app called TikTok. I mean, from dances and lip syncing and baking sourdough to brand deals and an entirely new platform for creators to grow on, the rise of TikTok and the legitimization of influencing as a career is something that I absolutely think the 2020s will be remembered for. In many ways, TikTok, with its new algorithm, this new way of reaching people, really democratized content creation. I've said it before on this podcast, and I'll say it again, because it finally gave everyone a fair shot where people were really able to discover your content even if you didn't have a following. And that's something that was really not the case on Instagram, maybe on YouTube a little more so because they always had that homepage. But like the Instagram Explore page was not that big of a thing unless you like really hit big on it at the right time. Very few people were on Instagram looking for new content. They were only there at first to connect with people they knew and then to connect with people who they specifically chose to follow. If you started seeing content from people who you didn't personally select to like hang out with, it was a very strange thing. And that's why TikTok's For You page and the way that their algorithm worked changed literally everything. And if for some reason you're not familiar with the TikTok algorithm, to put it very lightly, when you would create a video, there's two feeds on TikTok. You can choose the friends feed where you'll see content from people you follow. And then there's the For You page where TikTok chooses content based on your interests and how you've engaged with content before. So you could see a video and be the very first person seeing that video. Once that video gets shown to 100 people in a small test batch, if those people watched the video, liked it, and engaged with it, then the pool increases for how many people get shown that piece of content. And then it continues to go and go. And so that's how people who even didn't have that many followers were able to really start to build momentum on TikTok. I'm very proud of being an early TikTok adopter. I was on TikTok in October of 2019. And again, if I, hadn't been dealing with a lot of stuff during the COVID lockdown, maybe I would have tried to put some more effort and energy into it. And then the other thing that made TikTok different from platforms like Instagram was how many creation tools were available already in the app, so that someone who had never edited a video before could film right in the app, edit quickly, put music behind it, and get it posted. Like, the barrier to entry decreased so much. Whereas in the blogging days and even the big days of Instagram from, call it 2017 to 2019, where you would post highly curated, edited images that often required a digital camera, that often required skills and knowledge of how to edit and access to things like Adobe Lightroom or Premiere. And the fact that you could do it all from your phone now is really what opened up the door for anyone to choose to become a content creator. And I think that passive consumption is now gone in a way thanks to TikTok, because everybody has hot takes. Everyone has things to share or commentary to add or their own version of a day in the life or get ready with me or whatever content they want to create. I mean, to look to some examples of internet spectatorship where people got so involved in things that previously may not have been topics of conversation to the public was trials like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. The number of people who were able to report on those things as they were happening in real time was just unheard of before TikTok, really. TikTok also has replaced traditional trend cycles and has really highlighted micro trends and very, very niche things like the hot girl walk, having main character energy, book talk, beauty talk. TikTok made me buy this. It is such a common part of our everyday vocabulary now. And the widespread nature of the influence of what we see on TikTok specifically, not just on social media in general, is, again, something that wasn't a thing 5 years ago. And now with the ability for anyone to be a content creator, we've also really seen anyone who wants to can become a content creator, and content creators who really blow up and have established an audience can become true celebrities. I'm thinking about someone like Alex Earl, who started out making chaotic Get Ready With Me to Go Out at You Miami videos, who now has been on Dancing with the Stars. She has her own brand. She has a scholarship for You Miami students. Her family is getting their own reality show on Netflix. And you think of the early big players on TikTok too, like Charlie D'Amelio, Addison Rae, the Hype House in those days of 2020. There were just so many standout moments, especially from those early days, like the song Bored in the House Board, the Renegade Dance. Bella Porch's video, if you guys don't remember, I'm going to try to find a link to the original video and put it in the show notes. This video is like the dumbest video ever, but it has, I think, the most views out of any video on TikTok, or if not the most, it's definitely in the top 20. And it put Bella Porch on the map now, who has like singles out and who has so many followers. And it's literally just her lip syncing to a song called M to the B. I'm not even going to try to do it right now because it's kind of robotic and silly and I can't replicate it. But just her facial expressions and the fact that she committed to the bit skyrocketed that video. It really led to a true boom of the creator economy and the rise of more content creators and influencers who we've ever really seen before. If you ask anyone who is a newer content creator who's started posting mostly in the last 4 to 5 years, I bet you anything, a majority of them will say that they got their start on TikTok because there was also probably the removal of pressure for people who might know them on Instagram versus just getting discovered by an audience through the For You page. And it truly changed the game for everything. And if you guys want to hear a bit more about TikTok and specifically how I think TikTok shaped culture, we do talk about that in episode 77, where I talked more about like the TikTok ban / sale in the US before the sale went through earlier this year. So I can link that episode in the show notes for you guys as well. Okay, next up here, Taylor Swift became an economy of her own. And I do feel like that is the best way to kind of phrase it, because when you look at Taylor's career in the 2010s and also a little bit in the 2000s, she came out with her first album in 2006. You can definitely see the progression and you can definitely see her becoming a pop star. But this past couple of years has just truly elevated her to the point where she really is on a different level. Like numerically, if you look at her, she's worth over $2 billion at this point. Statistically, when you look at something like the Eras Tour and see that it was like the most successful concert of all time. When I think about people who have lived several lifetimes in the 2020s, Taylor Swift is certainly one of them. In the last 5 years, she has released 5 new albums and she has re-recorded 4 of her first 6 albums. I mean, the whole re-recording process to the point where she finally took ownership of her catalog in 2025 is nothing short of genius, because her fans were able to stream the songs that they originally loved and actually still support her at the same time without having to stream under old ownership and give those proceeds to someone who's not her. If you don't know this whole drama of Scooter Braun and the rights to her masters, I will try to find an article or something that sums it up to link in the show notes, because I do think that whole journey and this approach to her music and approach to getting her work back and taking back what's hers is something that a lot of musicians would maybe try to do, but not necessarily execute or accomplish in the same way that she did. And I do think it'll be like studied and talked about for years to come. Let's talk about the Eras Tour. If you guys want to hear the recap of my Eras Tour experience, I did fly to Amsterdam to attend the Eras Tour because it was somehow just as expensive to go see her in Europe as it was to go see her 15 minutes from me at MetLife. And I figured if you're going to go, might as well get a trip to Europe out of the whole thing as well, too. So if you want to hear my full Eras Tour recap from my experience attending the concert, I will link that episode for you. I mean, this was an economy in and of itself. Obviously, the Ticketmaster dynamic pricing was a big talking point and point of contention, but even beyond that, like the merch sales, like the friendship bracelet making, the docuseries, the concert film, like there was so much that really went into it that I do at the end of the day feel was very much in service of the fans and was very much in the spirit of creating some kind of community, a way to relive it, a way to bring a piece of it home with you with friendship bracelet making and trading. And for me personally, again, you can go listen to like the full recap of my experience coming right out of seeing the Eras tour. That was 2 years ago now, which is crazy to say. But it was everything I wanted and more as a fan. And I didn't even have like the best seat in the house or anything. I just fully enjoyed myself and soaked in every moment. And I think a big part of why I remember that night so well is because I just was actively even thinking like how lucky I am to be here and how much I appreciate this right now. As someone who has been listening since the single Teardrops on My Guitar came out in 2006, crying over a boy named Drew, which now I'm married to Andrew, so you guys do the math, okay? That is some alignment if I've ever heard of it. We do have to talk about Travis Kelce, of course, and one thing that I'll say as it relates to 2026 is that they are now married. They got married 2 weeks ago at the time this episode comes out, and Travis Kelce becoming her boyfriend, especially after the Joe Alwyn and Maddie Healy stuff, which she really addresses mostly through her album, The Tortured Poets Department. That's her 11th studio album. They actually are just such a fit, in my opinion. I think that he is someone who's very used to the spotlight, but I also feel like he's someone who really matches her energy and who likes the spotlight and who's very outgoing. Taylor has referred to him as a human exclamation point. Never met the guy, but I kind of get that vibe from what I know about him. I mean, the first time that she showed up at a Chiefs game and we saw her on our TVs, the number of women who have now turned in to football fans and specifically have turned into Chiefs fans because of her. It's just so endlessly amazing, like the impact that she has and the people that she can bring along with her into a new world, specifically because she's shown interest in it. Like when she was talking about reading sourdough blogs and she's like, I've probably been on your blog. I feel like so many people relate to that. When she finally, started showing up at these games and watching football, female viewership for NFL games has gone up significantly over the years. And Andrew and I recently listened to an episode of this podcast called Acquired, and they have a whole episode called the NFL episode. I am not going to suggest that you guys listen to this whole podcast because it's like literally 4 hours long. And unless you're a true football fan, and I would say that it was even like an hour too long for me personally, you're going to not care about most of this. But they did release this episode originally a couple of years ago, and then they came back to discuss it at the end. So within the last hour of the episode, they do mention like the Taylor Swift effect on football. I'm going to try to find this episode and link it for you guys, but more specifically find the timestamp where they speak about her impact. It is crazy. And again, Taylor in her Life of a Showgirl era, which is the last album that's been released at the time I'm recording this, she's out enjoying life again. With Joe Alwyn, she was very shut in. She was very just not who we all typically knew her to be. And even though she released quieter albums during COVID in 2020, she released Folklore. I believe that came out in August. And then Evermore came out in December. Those were interesting because those really stretched her as a songwriter, where she wasn't necessarily writing about herself as much and where she tapped into other storylines and things. But she, at her core, is like a happy, outgoing person. And again, to bring in a little bit of 2026 to it, like her attending the Knicks playoff game and her just being out and about at things and really seeming to enjoy life again and kind of take back a spotlight that has kind of always clearly been meant for her has been so interesting. And in her Life of a Showgirl era with Travis, not saying he deserves all of the credit for this necessarily, but he does bring out that side of her. They both do enjoy the spotlight. We've seen her so much more out and about in New York, enjoying life, attending sporting games, just being out more and seeming to have a ball doing so. And one other thing to mention from 2026 is that now she is the youngest woman inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame at age 36. And I don't know, in my eyes, just knowing what I know about music history and legacy, I think that this is going to be the equivalent of what Beatlemania was in the 60s for the 2010s and 2020s as a collective. Okay, let's also talk about streamers outpacing networks on TV production and audiences, because the way that we consume media has changed so much, and the TikTokification of social media and scrolling on our phones is definitely part of it. But network TV, it's really, it's down. is maybe one way to say it lightly. It is so not in any way what it used to be. I mean, the streamers are just pretty much knocking everything out of the park. And I feel like going into the 2020s, Netflix really was still the dominant platform. And now I feel like the crown has kind of been broken apart and spread among a couple of different places. I mean, once other streamers really started producing their own shows and also kind of consolidating and occasionally merging with other platforms, they really did challenge Netflix's dominance in that category. Looking back on a couple of shows that I feel like have defined the 2020s so far, number one, Love is Blind. Can we talk about Love is Blind US coming out on February 1st, 2020? What incredible timing. Everyone who was looking for something to watch stuck at home, there you go. Two people get engaged sight unseen on TV, and you get to watch it all play out from the moment that they say I do to the moment that they reveal and see each other, unto the moment they get to the altar and have to decide whether or not they agree that love is blind. We are already up to 10 seasons of Love is Blind in the US, and it's expanded to so many other countries. This has been an unbelievable earner for Netflix and has continued to outperform itself with each new season. Bridgerton, hello. I mean, the production, the value, the costumes, the fact that people are actually going back and reading the books now, like the books to movie and TV adaptations, just so good. House of the Dragon, we're currently getting season 3 that's airing right now in 2026, but even just seasons 1 and 2 brought everyone right back into the Game of Thrones world. Ted Lasso, such a feel-good show that we needed at the time. I actually didn't finish Ted Lasso. Should I go back and finish it? I watched all of season 1 and loved it, and I think part of season 2. Succession, oh my gosh, just fantastic television. Heated rivalry, it's all we could talk about in 2025, let me tell you. I put The Summer I Turned Pretty on here. I don't know if critics would argue that this is the best show ever, but as far as pop culture's moments go and live tweeting and fan commentary, that is in here along with Love Island USA and The Traitors. These reality shows, especially the ones that are kind of appointment viewing, and that is kind of true for The Summer I Turned Pretty, that it was appointment viewing where the episode would drop and everyone would watch it at the same time and have live reactions to it. I do feel like that has been the way that we like to watch again, because for a while we got into the binge mode where people drop a whole season all at once and you watch it basically all at once. That is still the case for some of these. For Love is Blind, they typically drop the first 5 or 6 episodes of the pods experience, and then the episodes leading up to the weddings get a little bit more spaced out. But Succession was appointment television. House of the Dragon is appointment television. Bridgerton, I think, would get dropped in two, a part 1 and a part 2. But even still, we're also in this age of kind of prestige television being created by streaming networks where more streamers are producing their own shows and the episodes are getting longer, but the individual seasons are getting shorter. So we're still getting a high production value, but usually we're getting 8 to 10 episodes versus traditional network TV where you would get 21 or 22 episodes. I'm pretty sure season 1 of Gossip Girl had 25 episodes, which is just... Could you imagine if there were 25 episodes of heated rivalry, or Bridgerton for that matter? I mean, maybe those characters would burn out too fast. Maybe it would be a little too hot and heavy. I don't know. But yeah, it's crazy just how many different platforms it feels like we need to be subscribed to, how hard it is to avoid spoilers now. And I think it's also worth noting too, even how many podcasts and different things that are not just TV and movies that are available to watch now on Netflix, Spotify, all these different platforms. It's one of the reasons that I was so adamant about making sure that this could be a video podcast when I first launched, and that I could realistically keep up with getting a video episode out every week, because I don't know, you never know. Netflix could be watching. Netflix, call me if you want to chat. And as kind of a subcategory of this, I've been thinking a lot about the renaissance of live events, because when we look at life post-COVID lockdown, all we were craving was to get out and do things and be around people again, as long as it was safe to do so. And obviously, thank God for the vaccines that enabled us to get out of that situation and be able to do all of this. I mean, the collective live experiences that we've had in the last 5 years have been pretty unparalleled. We already talked about Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. I would say Beyonce's Renaissance Tour was right up there with that. The women's sports boom, people getting really into college basketball and professional women's basketball, more people watching men's sports, and specifically more women watching men's sports as well. I think we have already broken some streaming records with this year's World Cup, tuning into things at the same time, like we just talked about before, the appointment television return. Also, surging prices for live experiences, I would say, have been a reflection of this too, with Ticketmaster dynamic pricing, people buying things that they don't actually intend to go to just so they can sell them for a markup, which is obviously unfortunate. And also the Olympics, like tuning in for the Winter Olympics that happened this past year, I would say was definitely up there. The Summer Olympics in Paris before that. On a somewhat related note, I also put on here Barbenheimer Summer, which was 2023. If you lived through it, you know. This was such like an internet era phenomenon where both Barbie and Oppenheimer were streaming at the box office at the same time, and it just created this swarm of people who went to the movies. Like, I think it broke all kinds of records, both movies on both sides, and I feel like both kind of targeted specific demographics. Barbie was obviously more tailored towards women. Oppenheimer, I guess you could say, because it was a war movie, kind of covered the other side. But people also saw both. Like, a lot of people would do a double feature to go and see the Barbie movie, and then they'd walk out of that theater and into Oppenheimer to go catch that showing. I mean, the memes that came out of this was crazy. The Barbie soundtrack was a whole thing. Like, your TikTok feed that summer was just filled with the Barbie songs. They also did a million collaborations. Like, they did so many collaborations. I can't even name any of them right now. I think they did one maybe with like a hairbrush. I think they did one with scrunchies. I think they did one with Stanley, maybe. Honestly, they kind of collaborated with everyone. So I feel like I got some of those correct just because that's how widespread it was. This kind of ties back into the shared cultural experiences and in-person experiences making such a comeback after lockdown, and also dressing for specific occasions and getting back into themes. I feel like we love a theme, and I feel like in part it's because of how many in-person excuses we're looking for to all get together. Like, I've been to many Galentine's Day get-togethers in the last few years. I have been to bachelorette parties that had themes attached to them. And for Barbenheimer, people were dressing up at the movies. I mean, more so for the Barbie movie than Oppenheimer, though. If you dressed up for the Oppenheimer movie, feel free to reach out and share a picture of what you wore to the movie theater. But, you know, like wearing pink to the movies, and I think we've seen that with some other films that we're going to talk about as we get to them. And this is kind of another side of the same coin of these shared cultural experiences. And on the other side of these shared cultural experiences, I also just had a little section here about award shows and sporting events with their viral moments. So I'm thinking about Rihanna's Super Bowl halftime performance and revealing her pregnancy and basically using it as an ad for Fenty Beauty, which I thought was genius and great across the board. Taylor and Travis kissing after they won the Super Bowl, the famous 2022 Oscars slap featuring Will Smith and Chris Rock. There's also plenty of viral red carpet moments, you know, couples hard launching, the Met Gala, too many to name in just this episode. This summer, obviously, we've had World Cup games. The Knicks also just had a historic run and won the NBA Finals. And I think another interesting through line about this is ties back into the TikTok of it all that we were talking about earlier, where award shows are becoming social media content and everyone's a critic. Like, everyone now has an opinion on red carpet fashion. Everyone has an opinion on why this should not have won Best Picture and this other thing should have. And it's kind of crazy just how much commentary goes in and around to these events now, and how, you know, searches for all of these things spike, and how content grows when you look at the hashtags after an event happens. So very interesting. Now, I feel like this has also been the age of reboots and of nostalgia. And I think these two kind of go hand in hand, because the reason that reboots come about in the first place is because we're nostalgic for the original product, right? Or we're nostalgic for the original movie, story, whatever it was. So I'm thinking about the Freakier Friday sequel. I'm thinking about The Devil Wears Prada 2. I'm also thinking about Wicked, which obviously is a musical that's actually been long running on Broadway. And the fact that it was adapted into not just one, but two different blockbuster movies is really crazy. Also, the amount of Wicked collabs that came out. Like, I got so many pitches in my inbox that were like, Wicked nail art, Wicked hairbrush, Wicked this and that. And again, too many to keep track of, but go off, guys, get those licensing deals. The Gossip Girl reboot, which I'm not gonna lie, I did not partake in because there is no topping what was originally made. And also Sex and the City, and just like that. I didn't even have that on this list, but obviously it just came to mind as I was thinking about it. And I just think in general, my generation of millennials is really just nostalgic for, the 2000s. I think we've hit that point where we remember how simple things were back then. We remember like the clothes we used to wear, the way we used to talk, the celebrities we used to look up to, what we used to do in our free time. And we get a little nostalgic for those things. If you want to hear more about 2000s fashion specifically and the nostalgia that we have for that, I did that episode, I think 2 weeks ago, so I can link it in the show notes if you want to check it out. Okay, the next category is called Everybody Shrink. So let's talk about it. This is kind of a two-parter with things that go hand in hand. This is both the rise and newfound accessibility of GLP-1 medications, along with a renewed interest in being skinny. So what's going on? Why does everyone very intent on wanting to slim down? Well, first of all, let me just say I don't begrudge anyone for using a GLP-1. I think everyone is absolutely entitled to do whatever they want with their own body. I think that at the end of the day, the availability and accessibility of GLP-1s is ultimately going to be a net positive for people, especially who maybe have struggled in the past to lose weight, if that's something that's been a concern for them. However, I also remember just a few short years ago that we were all on like the body positivity train, and we were all being really supportive of everybody being an acceptable body to show up and exist in the world. I think the body positive movement was finding its stride really in like the late 2010s specifically. I feel like that was a time where there were a lot of like plus size fashion bloggers and people who were showing up and kind of being a representation for people online that maybe they hadn't seen as much in the past. People who were building a following for having real bodies, but still dressing cute, still living their life, still being confident. I feel like that was content that was really needed and still needed, by the way, and celebrated though in the late 2010s. I actually wrote a piece about made to order fashion for Fashionista in December of 2018, and I feel like this was kind of just one example of a lot of things at the time where, I don't know, we were thinking about the fact that every single body is so unique and that there were even companies that were tailoring clothes specifically to people's bodies. So in 2024, it was reported that 5.8% of adults in the US were taking a GLP-1 medication, and by 2025, that number more than doubled to 12.4%. Again, everyone is entitled to do whatever they want with their bodies. I just, as someone who is very online and who is constantly looking at myself when editing and scrolling my feed and just seeing so many people who I know like kind of shrink all at once, I don't know. It's to be very honest, it is messing with my brain a tiny bit. I think it creates this psychological shift for people too who are kind of still on the observation side, who have not participated in GLP-1 medications, to suddenly question a lot of stuff and question what they're ordering out at a restaurant, whether or not they've gotten enough steps in a day. I don't know. It's just, again, I want anyone to be able to take this medication who genuinely wants to take it. I honestly don't fully even know what to say about this, if I'm being very honest. Like, I have this point in my outline, but at the end of the day, it is something that messes with my brain as well. And I feel like I am maybe in some ways also not qualified to speak on it. I just think that as someone who consumes a lot of content, I am just so much more tuned into it now. Like at first, I felt like a total idiot because I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe they've just been doing this, or I don't know how it happened. And then as soon as it gets confirmed why it happened, I'm like, oh, like why did I not why didn't I know that? Like, I feel stupid. There are lots of influencers who are on it right now, some of whom are saying that they're on it, some of whom are not saying that they're on it. A friend of mine actually sent me a TikTok of someone who kind of explained this better than what I'm talking about right now, so I can link that TikTok in the show notes too. I don't know. At the end of the day, truly, like, to each their own. I'm not here to tell anyone what to do or not to do, of course, but it's just something that I can't help but notice. And that kind of makes me feel, I don't know, weird, bad as someone whose body has really changed a lot in the last 5 years. In part because I was 25 in 2020 and my metabolism, what I was in college and everything just slowed down. And the fact that I was not commuting into the city anymore and moving as much changed my body in some ways. But also just in the fact that, like, we look at ourselves so much all the time, and it gives us so many more opportunities to be critical of ourselves, even when we are feeling good and we are doing things to take care of ourselves as much as we can. So maybe this is a question for another day or something that I can come back to you with when I have some better thoughts formed, but it's noticeable, it's happening, and it's extremely available and accessible, more so than it's ever been. And last but not least, we can't talk about the 2020s without talking about AI or artificial intelligence. There are probably some of you listening to this right now who still absolutely loathe AI and don't want anything to do with it. And there are some of you probably listening right now who can barely remember a time before AI and who have very much engrossed themselves in learning different platforms and utilizing it for different things in your life. There's no right answer, obviously, but ChatGPT and then the arrival of other AI assistants, it's hard to ignore in the same way that I feel like the GLP-1 situation is hard to ignore. And everyone kind of has their favorite platforms, or they've, turned on or turned off different AI features that platforms that they already use offer. There's a lot of debate and conversation still around AI generated content, where it's pulling its inspiration from, the question of ethics around use cases for when it is taking in information or using something that exists already to create a slightly different or customized version of it. There's so many debates to be had here about work and creativity, and I think that there are lots of people who are finding huge benefits in AI. I think that if it can be put towards, research and finding a cure for a rare cancer, that is a huge win. I think if it can help save businesses time and money by streamlining parts of business that they previously did need to manage by hand. I mean, I even use AI tools to streamline my business because I am a single person running a content business where I am publishing on all of these different platforms in any given week. And I am able to do more and be more consistent now because of AI tools. There's also questions about AI and its use in schools and how it's impacting education. I would also add that a lot of students who were forced to attend, Zoom university in the pandemic, it probably didn't help with that much either. I mean, people are leaning on AI more than ever to talk about their relationships, their work, what they're eating, what they're cooking, what's in their home, what beauty products to buy. It can really feel all encompassing in that sense. And if you want to hear more about AI, we talk a lot about using AI as a creative in episode 92 of the podcast, which I think is called something like How to Use AI Without Replacing Your Brain. Now, those are some of the most defining culture moments of the 2020s so far. And I guess the question here is, like, what does culture represent to us now? What is culture? What do we define it as in this day and age where everything is super convenient, where you can get basically anything you want right away, where shows are being dropped all at once and you can binge them all, and the way that we're consuming media has changed from our phones to streaming networks and all of those different things. And not for anything, but to also remember and question who is controlling the media that we consume and how the management of certain platforms have changed over the years. Twitter becoming X under Elon Musk's ownership, Oracle and Silver Lake investors buying some of the US share of TikTok, Facebook becoming Meta, and that new Social Network trailer. Have you guys seen it yet with Jeremy Strong in it? It looks crazy. So speaking of reboots, watch the trailer for that. I will link it in the show notes. I do think that finding like our own collective moments that we can all experience in real life together without worrying how they'll be distilled through an algorithm that has a heavier hand, manipulating it than ever before. And also just trying to practice as much literacy as we can in media, in, actually building our vocabulary back up again, thinking about who owns the platforms that we're consuming content from, whether or not what we're seeing is actually truthful, if it's been verified or fact checked, and just generally trying to be conscious and think deeply about what we're consuming and not be so easily influenced by things, which is kind of funny for me to say as someone who would maybe classify themselves as an influencer. But this is where we are at in the mid 2020s. And I would love to hear from you guys. Like, what do you think the top defining moment from the last 5 years is? Do you have any predictions for the next 5 years? Is there anything I didn't mention on this list that you would like to include? Leave a comment wherever you're watching or listening. Leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube, comment if you're listening on Spotify. Always feel free to send me an email or DM us on Instagram at Create and Consume Pod or TikTok and let us know what you thought of the episode. And by us, I mean me. Just me, the podcast person who you're listening to right now. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today and for listening. And I'll talk to you all again next week.